not just like, rumor mill, dark corner of the internet type fodder. There has been, all kinds of talk over the years. Going back to last year's college football playoff, it was very, very serious reporters were talking about this. Clemson's a sign-stealing team, man. They are known to be great at sign stealing. I've wondered all year long, calendar year, I've wondered all year long, does the presence of Derion Kendrick and maybe some tricks of the trade that he might know, does that make it more difficult for Clemson to steal signs on Saturday? Because, as was talked about a bunch before the game against Ohio State, this is something that Clemson's really pretty good at. Jay Shipe says YouTube's not up yet. It will be in a second. Jordan says that JT Daniels going to – I think he says actually JD, Jordan Davis, going to have a big game on Saturday. We're going to talk about Jordan Davis in particular in just a moment. Paige Holloway, we'll make this our last comment. She says we can discuss all these angles over and over, but it flat out comes down to the offensive line. We must be able to protect the quarterback and run the ball, period. And I think Paige is 100% right about that. Are we fired up on the platform? So Facebook, YouTube, everybody's here. Hey, glad to have all of you with us for DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort today. It's Connor Riley. It is some leaked audio, possible bulletin board material from years ago that may come back to haunt a Clemson coach if it is indeed real, and I have no reason to believe that it isn't. Dabo Swinney playing mind games, or did he reveal a problem for the Tigers on Saturday? What do you say we try to figure all of that out right now? It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Harris Cherokee Resort. Find us online at Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So we are in kind of the world of mind games as you get ready for Georgia-Clemson on Saturday. You've got Georgia, I think, possibly hinting that some of its injured players are healthier than they might actually be. And obviously you want to do everything you can to get Clemson thinking about all that kind of stuff. And if you're, Clemson, you're doing your own version of this. The offensive coordinator for the Tigers, Tony Elliott, was recently talking about the role that Derion Kendrick, the former Clemson defensive back, might play here when it comes to this. So there's a lot of stuff out there, related to what it's going to take to win this game on Saturday. And it is quite possibly that Clemson coach Dabo Swinney may have either very honestly and forthrightly revealed a pretty big issue for Clemson on Saturday, or this is possibly just another example of the gamesmanship and the mind games that coaches try to play ahead of a big game. You can kind of decide for yourself on that. Let me first of all do this, and this is kind of a short clip, but I think it sets the stage for where things stand right now with, Clemson, who has had a competition ongoing to see who its starting center is going to be. Georgia has had an injury to his expected starting center, Warren Erickson. Smart revealing on Tuesday that Erickson's doing well. He's been practicing, but his status for Saturday, for the most part, is unknown. And, there's been talk of, is it Jamari Salyer, who rotates from another position to start at center? Is it a guy like Cedric Von Prawn, former elite recruit, who's be looking to earn his first start in all of this? One way or another, that has been a little bit of an unsettled situation for Georgia. And when Smart spoke to reporters not too long ago, he kind of explained why this truly matters. This is only a few words long, but the words themselves pack a punch about just how important this particular position is. This is Georgia coach Kirby Smart. Take a listen to this.
Center is one of those positions that you can't play with. You better have a center because the play doesn't get started without that.
So Kirby Smart says center is one of those positions that you can't play with. You got to have that center. Otherwise, you can't even start the play. And I think that's, pretty true, right? I mean, we've seen that when it comes to, everything going on with Georgia. Obviously, what's happened with Warren Erickson and everything that, has kind of gone down with insertion potentially of Cedric Von Prawn or the possible insertion of Jamari Salyer. That's one of those issues that and we've said it up here before, that if you're looking to see the Georgia offense at its best on Saturday, a lot of Georgia fans have been, paying close attention to that offensive line as it is. But the center position in particular is a huge part of that. Now you got Dabo Swinney and the Clemson side of this there as well. The audio on this we don't have. I thought I did. Now I don't. So I can't play this for you. But Dabo Swinney was asked directly yesterday if he had settled on his center position yet. Dabo, in the midst of all this, saying, no, we may have to play multiple guys, and saying that likely there's a very good chance he will play multiple centers on Saturday and essentially shrugging all of this off and saying, hey, we got to put somebody out there and, get it rolling and kind of see what happens after that, essentially kind of shrugging that off. And listen, I don't have to tell you, that line coming from Dabo Swinney of, we're probably playing multiple centers, understanding how important Kirby Smart just described that as being a moment ago. I don't have to tell you, because you already know, how much that gets Georgia fans licking their chops about what Georgia may have a chance to do on Saturday. Wait, Clemson's so unsettled at center that it's going to play multiple guys during the game? That is not typically what most teams would want to do. You want to have that guy that provides a level of comfort, a security blanket, if you will, for Tigers quarterback DJ Uiagalelei. You want to be settled at center. So is this really true? Is Dabo really going to play multiple centers? Or is this just his way of poor mouthing his own team? We've talked before in the last few days about the tradition of guys like Larry Munson around Georgia or Vince Dooley, the legendary former coach, and their way of kind of sandbagging and making it sound like their team had no chance against the big bad opponent they were about to play. And maybe this is Dabo Swinney's own version of that. And, you can obviously read about the three guys who've been kind of competing here and kind of, maybe who has that edge and who doesn't. But I guess there's a part of me, and I said this morning, I made an appearance on our radio partner, 960 The Ref. I made an appearance on their morning show as I do each and every Wednesday. And what I said was, it's almost like to my ears, as someone who's obviously a fan of Georgia, wants UGA to win the game on Saturday, it's almost to my ears as if this is just too good to be true, right? Because if it really is true that, oh my gosh, Clemson doesn't know its center and it's going to have to throw a bunch of guys out there, rotating them to even figure out who it has, then honestly that becomes a great, great chance for Georgia to show its teeth with an area on this roster that's probably the deepest of them all on the defensive line. And in particular, the guy for Georgia who lines up opposite on the other side of the ball from that center, the nose guard Jordan Davis. I mean, listen, it's time to get very specific with predictions. It's time to not hem and haw about what might happen and get very real about what is going to happen for Georgia this year. My personal belief is Jordan Davis is the best player on Georgia's roster. My personal belief is he's about to show that in a big way this season, and he may start showing you that from the word go against Clemson on Saturday. And this, for me, is true whether Clemson secretly really does have its center situation figured out and everything's fine there, or certainly it becomes more likely to be true if there's any hint of truth to what Dabo Swinney told reporters on Tuesday, which is, hey, we may be rotating guys there. I don't care who your center is. You can have Mike Webster over there. I don't care who your center is. When you look at having to line up across from Jordan Davis on Saturday, Georgia's best chance to win a game like this is to have a guy like Davis truly matter. We've got a recent track record of interior defensive linemen who've left the SEC and gone on to the first round of the NFL draft. Think about Javon Kinlaw from South Carolina. Think about Derek Brown from Auburn. These were good defensive tackles that for their teams, especially in their final years, were more than just the space eaters, more than just the block occupiers, more than just the guys who freed things up for linebackers. They themselves were the kinds of guys that were capable of wreaking havoc. And I believe, against Clemson, against every game after that, I believe you're about to see the same kind of stuff for Jordan Davis. Obviously in his hometown of Charlotte on Saturday, but this is a guy who came back to Georgia for a reason. Lead Georgia to a championship success, but be part of his own maturation as well, with a chance to really get the attention of NFL scouts. In fact, very interesting exchange yesterday when Georgia coach Kirby Smart spoke to the reporters. Our buddy Connor Riley, who's after being a little bit sick, was able to be a part of that Zoom call last night and was able to ask Kirby directly a question that we've talked about on this show many times. The idea that Jordan Davis is now not just a first and second down run stop guy, but now he's also a third down player as well, getting after quarterbacks. And Kirby Smart took that topic head on yesterday. Take a listen to this.
I mean, he's elite at pocket push. He's elite power. One of the strongest kids I've ever been around. He helps you the way he's able to run games and things because he's just different. I mean, there's just nobody quite like him in terms of the volume and the reps. But he has a third down role for us, yes, but his primary role is first and second down, obviously, and he's worked really hard to improve his quickness, and that's been one of the areas that most he knows that when he's in there that there's less run game in between those A gaps with him in there, so it's it's all about, can he affect the perimeter and can he cover down and do things? And that's what we've tried to work really hard on.
When you're in the presence of Davis in person, you can't help but be in awe of how big he is. This is a giant of a man. He blocks out the sun, literally speaking. And you hear Georgia coach Kirby Smart there say he's also worked on his quickness. He's also improved his mobility. This is a guy that's also added to his athletic repertoire to go along with the gigantic size that's made him a run-stopping force, literally probably the best run-stopping defensive lineman in college football on first and second down the last couple of years. Now he's also quicker, more athletic there as well. I think that Dabo Swinney's probably poor-mouthing his team a little bit when he says, I don't have my center figured out. Hey, we may rotate guys there. I think that's gamesmanship from Swinney. But even if you do have center figured out, you may have that spot on your roster figured out. I'm guessing you don't have Jordan Davis figured out. And if you're looking for one of the main reasons why, if you're thinking about Georgia victory on Saturday, one of the guys that needs to be in the spotlight, a guy who ought to fill a prominent portion of our discussion coming up on Monday in the aftermath of that game, if that is indeed the case, I think you look no further than Jordan Davis. This could be a big year for Davis, and no better place, no better time to get that started. In his hometown of Charlotte, just a few steps away from Mallard Creek High School where he grew up, against a big-time Clemson team, huge national stage, possibly a coming-out party for Davis. If there's issues along the Clemson offensive line, it makes it easier. But easy, hard, whatever else, Jordan Davis, I believe, is going to do what needs to be done against the Tigers coming up on Saturday night. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. We are glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m. We're on the page at DawgNation.com. We're on the DawgNation app. We're Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all kinds of video platforms. So fun to be able to reach folks so many different ways via video. Also the podcast platform. The podcast lately, not to, we don't talk numbers around here very much. The podcast has kind of been on fire a little bit lately, which is kind of a fun thing to be able to see ahead of the upcoming season. And all those platforms, the Apple Player, the Google Player, worldfamousDawgNation.com, all kinds of ways. Spotify, some of you listen directly via SoundCloud, all kinds of fun stuff. Radio at noon, the Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. It is just really, really enjoyable for me to share this show so many different ways. And big thanks to our friends at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort for making all that possible. And listen, some of you already think about Harris right now because just a 2-hour drive from where I am, sitting right here in the metropolitan Atlanta area, you can get to Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, whether it's the original Harris Cherokee Casino Resort or Harris Cherokee Valley River. And you love the casino table games, you love the gourmet restaurants, you love the world-class spa, the certainly high-fashion shopping opportunities. You love all of that, but you're also very well aware as we enter into the college football season that the book is open. Sports gaming is available for you right there in the mountains of western North Carolina. That means you got a strong opinion on Georgia Clemson. You got a strong opinion on Bama, Miami. The other big games are going to be played during the opening weekend. You can go to Harris Cherokee Casino Resort and you get your action down on those games. That's a really cool thing and a fun thing to be able to do. So enjoy that. Enjoy the casino and play golf at Sequoia National. Just a wonderful getaway. Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. You can find out more online. Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. That's Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. All right, before we're done today, bizarre situation for South Carolina when it comes to their starting quarterback for the season opener. We'll tell you about that. Texas A&M and Coach Jimbo Fisher, they are in the news there today there as well for the same reason the Aggies seem to always be in the news. We will talk about that before we're done. Our buddy Connor Riley will stop by. We'll dive deep into everything for Georgia Clemson on Saturday. But first, I want to go around the doghouse, furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go. And there was a very revealing moment yesterday from Kirby Smart, the likes of which we don't often get. And it was set up by something that Smart had said previously. We have talked about Smart's appearance with Marty and McGee. Now, listen, to be honest with you, I'm not always the biggest fan of Marty and McGee. To me, I'm a true Southerner. Some of the Marty and McGee stuff to me feels like shtick, but nonetheless, Marty McGee sat down with Smart, the other SEC coach. I actually watched some of the shows that they did. It's been on the SEC network, and I have to admit, I think they've all been pretty good, the Smart one included. And one of the things that Smart talked about a lot in that interview was his belief that Georgia was eventually going to kick in the door and win a national championship. And to be honest, that's not always the kind of thing that Smart says when he's speaking to the typical beat writer contingent that surrounds him on a typical press conference. So yesterday, one of the reporters said, "Hey, I saw you on the SEC network tell Marty McGee that you thought Georgia was eventually going to win a national championship. Why do you feel that way?" And Smart, much the same way he was pretty candid about this with the SEC network guys, was also pretty candid yesterday in his belief that eventually it's only a matter of time before Georgia accomplishes the goal that we would all say is a very reasonable expectation for the Dogs. This is pretty good stuff from Kirby Smart. Take a listen.
Well, it has to be coming, right? I mean, if it's not coming, then what are we doing? I mean, so I don't look at it in perspective of when. I look at it in perspective of what's important now. What are we doing now? And I know the people in this organization. I know the administration. I know the people in the state. I know the people that love Georgia, and the energy, enthusiasm they have. It's always long overdue, right? I don't care if you won one 3 years ago. It's overdue. For me, that's the end game. That's the goal. That's what you're always trying to work towards. It doesn't make it a successful season or failure if you don't. I just don't look at things that way. I don't let that control my thought process in my life. But I certainly pursue excellence, and that's what excellence is.
I love that line there at the end. As a person, I pursue excellence, and the definition of excellence in my profession is winning a national championship. And I think one of the best things about Kirby Smart is the fact that from the word go back and find the old video in 2016 when he first took this job, or I guess it would have been like December of 2015 when he was announced. Go back and find those old videos, and even at the time, he embraced the gigantic expectations that exist in a place like Georgia. And as an alumnus of the university, he also has an understanding for how the long-suffering Georgia fan psyche and mentality contribute to those expectations, because he gets the restlessness that comes with having been a Georgia fan, and I think that's one of the best things about Kirby Smart. Now, at the beginning of the comment there, if you want to nitpick a little bit, the idea of it has to be coming, the national championship. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily true, and I think that Kirby Smart knows that. I think that maybe he just kind of misspoke there at the beginning of that clip, that it is not a foregone conclusion that it's going to happen. It's not a natural progress, right? I mean, the early stages of development as a coach and as a team, some of those first steps can be a little bit easy. But as they say, the last couple of steps are truly a doozy. You don't just stand pat, wait, and have the championship come to you. Unfortunately, in the sport that we're in now, with so few teams, there's only a small number of teams who even have a reasonable idea they could win a national championship. Thankfully, Georgia's one of those. That you, in that small room that only features the likes of the Alabamas and maybe the LSUs, certainly Clemson, probably Ohio State, Georgia, and that's really about it. There is nobody else in that room. Texas A&M may be trying to get in there, or somebody else may be trying to get in there, but for the most part, the teams that can win a national championship are the ones that I just mentioned. So in that battle royale of those small handful of teams, you can't just wait patiently for your turn to arrive. You got to take it from somebody else. And the way you take that is by being as dynamic as you need to be offensively, and unlocking the defensive guys you have to not just play gap sound, fundamentally strong football, but actually go out there and wreak havoc against quarterbacks, freeing them to do what they obviously dream about doing. And that's one of the things I think that Georgia fans hope to see this upcoming year. Not Georgia patiently waiting for its turn to win a national championship, but going out there and actually taking that national championship, which obviously turns our attention back to Saturday against Clemson, a team that's done that a couple of times. And listen, Georgia can't win a national championship on Saturday, right? You got a whole season after that. And Smart, these Georgia players who've pointed that out continuously, are correct to point that out, that you can only win one game on Saturday. The actual championship games come after that. And frankly, it's the games that Georgia plays after Clemson that even allow you to qualify for that championship. You've got to win the SEC to get in that position. We understand all of that. But just because Georgia can't win a championship doesn't mean that it can't do something pretty important. Because here's the thing, and Smart just touched on this, that hey, it's been a long time since Georgia won a national championship. Smart says no matter how long ago it'd been, it would have always been too long because you're always ready for the next one. But we know that that Georgia's been waiting for a while to win this national championship, since 1980. And here's the thing you're also kind of aware of there, too, is much the same way that fans go back and forth about all this kind of stuff. Coaches kind of do the same thing, negative recruiting in the recruiting trail. That's obviously an issue that Georgia faces. I had a couple of people send this to me, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the Twitter handle of the person who sent that because I would normally want to give credit. But I guess there's old video that Justin Flo, the linebacker, once shared when he was taking a recruiting visit to Clemson, and Brent Venables, the Clemson defensive coordinator, was taking Flo on a tour around the facility. This is one of those things that was like on Instagram Live or streamed on Facebook or something along those lines. And Venables is showing all those national championship trophies that Clemson, and knowing that Flo had been kind of a potential, I guess, factor and Georgia had been a potential factor in his recruitment there as well. Venables said something, leaked audio here, and I can't verify this is real. I have no reason to believe it's not. But Venables said something that, if you want a window in kind of how the negative recruiting against Georgia goes, this might be an example of that. This is Clemson defensive coordinator Brent Venables, at least purported to be, from a leaked audio of a recruiting visit from Justin Flo some years ago. Take a listen to this.
Well, the champ's led right here. Really? It's a champion? It's been 40 years since Georgia, so we right here. If we keep in track.
We keep in track, he says there at the end of that clip, trying to sound cool. So here's the point, and we'll wrap this up. Georgia can't win a national championship on Saturday. It's just one game, one start to one season. But they can shut that up. A program like Clemson saying we're better than Georgia because we have won national championships, Georgia hasn't, and on the recruiting trail, 1980, it's been 40 years. Good luck trying to sell that to recruits if those same recruits, and by the way, we'll talk to Jeff about this on Friday, there is a long list of folks going to be in the building in Charlotte on Saturday. Good luck trying to sell to those recruits that, it's been 1980 since Georgia won a national championship, they're ancient history. Good luck trying to sell that as a negative recruiting pitch on the recruiting trail going forward if those same recruits see Georgia drag Clemson all over that field on Saturday. We're keeping track. Yeah, Georgia may be keeping track come Saturday there as well of the fact that Clemson has had the easy track through the SEC and I should say through the ACC and some of the things it's got a chance to take advantage of. Georgia's trek through the SEC a little different and all of that. Georgia's wanted that head-to-head game. They want to invite the comparison of these two programs, Georgia and Clemson, that have battled for guys like Justin Flo and others. They want to see what it looks like to see these two teams on the field together at the same time. And you better believe that behind the scenes, Venables and those other guys are saying that and more about what Georgia isn't. And frankly, I'm not scandalized by negative recruiting. It goes on. I'm not worried about it. If you get your feelings hurt easily, recruiting's just not for you. It's a full contact sport. There is hand-to-hand combat when it comes to who gets a chance to win which recruiting battles. But that doesn't mean that you also don't use a chance to do something on the field to shut all that up and to make it impossible to negative recruit against Georgia going forward. Yes, Georgia may have to wait a while for its national championship opportunity, but it doesn't have to wait very long to beat Clemson on the field and make it a lot harder for Clemson to say anything negative on the trail about Georgia going forward. So keep that in mind, the words of Brent Venables. Let that ring in your ears as Georgia goes out and gets a chance to get a little pound of flesh coming up Saturday night there in Charlotte. That is Around the Doghouse. It's furnished today by our friends at Rooms to Go, and it is so good to have Rooms to Go with us because, listen, I've had a lot of furniture in my house over the years that has been furnished by Rooms to Go. And the cool thing is, whether you want a furniture piece, you want the entire room taken care of, you want kind of like an accent piece, any kind of, decor item, it can all be there for you at Rooms to Go. And you can stop by and see one of their showrooms and kind of put your hands on it and figure it out yourself. You can start your shopping experience online at roomstogo.com. You want to upgrade the look inside your home. You want to make that room feel more comfortable. You make it more enjoyable. More the kind of thing that you're proud to bring friends and family over, give them a chance to see. Rooms to Go can do all that for you. As I said before, you want the individual piece, you want the full room furnished, you need that perfect, accent piece for the extra decor. Whatever you want, it's all right there for you at Rooms to Go. So stop by and see them. Locations all over our great state and wherever you are there as well, but also online at roomstogo.com. Make sure you check that out. And it is great to have Rooms to Go furnishing Around the Doghouse for us here today. All right, so very busy show for us. Obviously, emotions running high for Georgia against Clemson on Saturday, as you might imagine. And let's keep that conversation going right now. For all the stuff, practice, coaches, players, the things that have been said, the situation on the other side with Clemson. Let's do it all with Connor Riley right now. Kroger Fresh Take with him, and good to have all of you with us too.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Connor Riley, who was on the PUP list yesterday, is physically unable to perform. He was on the PUP list yesterday, but he's feeling better here today, and it's good to have him as a part of our Kroger Fresh Take here on DawgNation Daily here today. Connor, listen, we live for college football season, but you know this, and we've said this so many times with so many people this week. While we live for the season, even within the season, you don't get too many that feel like this, where, I mean, there's just fever pitch of emotion, folks fired up on both sides. You know, you're lucky as a fan or a person working in broadcast media, or I guess written media there too. You're just lucky to have some games like this to really sink your teeth into, and it seems like thus far everybody's enjoying it. Just please let us still be enjoying this come Saturday night, Sunday morning. But nonetheless, what a great week it's been thus far.
Yeah, you know, you think back recent seasons, there's probably been one regular season game a year between two top 5 teams, and to Georgia to get that right out of the gate, I think is going to be something that's very much looking forward to. And, you know, I think it's going to be a pretty great game. These two teams, I know Kirby Smart sort of dissuaded the notion that they were similar, but they match up, I think, really well together. I'm going to be really interested to see how DJ Uiagalelei and JT Daniels play off against each other, because with how I think even those two teams are, whichever quarterback is able to make more plays, I think he's going to end up winning this game.
So let me bounce a couple things with you here for a moment. Let me start with Dabo Swinney yesterday, poor-mouthing his team, rotating at center. Listen, I just don't think I've been living well enough, Connor, to truly earn this. You know, the idea that Clemson really could be deficient at center, knowing how strong Georgia is up the middle defensively. That's a huge advantage for Georgia if it's true. I'm just not the kind of person that will even allow myself to believe that life could be that easy. My guess is Dabo Swinney is probably sandbagging here a little bit. And listen, honestly, I don't even really care who the starting center for Clemson is, but if they know who it is and that guy's earned their trust during practice, then that's kind of all that matters to me. And I'm assuming the latter is more true than the former, that Dabo knows his center and just playing games with his press conference yesterday. Do you agree?
It can't be this easy. I've got a big feature that I've been working on for a while coming out on Jordan Davis tomorrow, and it can't be like you can't make it that easy for him. He is one of the best defensive linemen in all of college football, an absolute monster in the run-stuffing game, and I'm really interested to see how much he's used in a pass-rushing role. But you think of dominant defensive line performances in college football, I think of the last 15 years, you think Ndamukong Suh, what he did to Texas in the 2009 Big 12 championship game. I don't think Jordan Davis will do that, but if Clemson doesn't have its ducks in a row in the middle of that line, he's going to make things incredibly difficult for DJ Uiagalelei and that Clemson offense. I
think Davis is Georgia's best player. Do you agree?
I think you'd have to say that as of right now. Now, if George Pickens were healthy, maybe you could throw him in there, but on September 4th, he will be the best player for Georgia on that football field.
Yeah, so it's fun to think about all of that. The other thing that I brought up was, and a couple people had shared some audio with me, like an old thing that supposedly Brent Venables talking about Georgia not winning a national championship since 1980 and how they're keeping track of all of that. I told our audience, it's like, I don't get scandalized by recruiting stuff. I mean, people say things in the recruiting trail. That's just kind of how it goes around here. But it is a reminder, Connor, that Georgia's got a lot to play for on Saturday. It's just one game. But, man, you can either go a long way towards quieting a very unpleasant narrative, or you can unfortunately amplify that to a degree that's going to make most UGA fans uncomfortable. We talked on yesterday's show about the belief that the Georgia players themselves have a chance to earn in themselves by winning a game like this. It just seems like there's so much unlocked by a win. I treat this game as a very big deal for Georgia. Mathematically, they're still very much alive for the college football playoff, even if they do lose. But sometimes football is about more than just pragmatic, tangible things. Sometimes there's a little bit of a mystical, intangible element that kind of hovers above all of this. And for Georgia, knowing its recent backstory, for Clemson, knowing its recent backstory, to me, symbolically, there is a lot on the line on Saturday. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, this game infinitely means more to Georgia than it does Clemson. If Clemson loses, they can say, first game replacing Trevor Lawrence, one of the best quarterbacks in college football history. First game replacing Travis Etienne, all-time ACC leading rusher. All the sort of turnovers that they've had. And while we've all sort of written off that Georgia can go 11-0 against the rest of its schedule, Clemson absolutely can, just given the talent gap between them and the rest of the ACC. With Georgia, as you sort of just laid out there, this game means so much more. Maybe not so much for JT Daniels, but certainly for Kirby Smart and the narrative that has been built around him. He goes out and wins this. Well, yes, it's not beating Alabama, the true white whale that he has to try and conquer. It would mean a lot for him and give him a real signature victory, more so than I think maybe even that win over Oklahoma in the 2017 Rose Bowl, because if you're not beating Alabama, beating Clemson is the next best you can get to beating the top teams in the sport. And so I think that'd be a huge pelt to put on the wall for Kirby Smart and really show that, sure, while we haven't done it against Alabama yet, we can do it against any great team in this country, including Clemson.
I'm curious of your opinion on this. Kirby Smart downplays it. It seems like Tony Elliott, the Clemson offensive coordinator, may have built it up a little bit. What do you think Derion – now, Kendrick's a good player, so obviously he's an on-field factor, but what do you think the presence of Kendrick, having like 5 minutes ago been on the Clemson roster, now being at Georgia, how much of a factor, inside information, tricks of the trade, how much does Kendrick provide Georgia in this game, in your opinion?
I'd probably side with Kirby Smart, maybe not necessarily as much as we think. He probably knows personnel, like individual, like how, Joe Nada likes to get out of his routes or things like that. But in terms of schematic breakdowns, in terms of knowing the ins and the outs, it's very rare for a player to know what every single player is doing on the field at one point in time. So from that standpoint, I maybe downplay the role that Kendrick has in terms of the intricate knowledge he has of this Clemson defense and Clemson team as a whole. But in terms of like individual things of what guys like to do, I think maybe there he might have a leg up.
I mean, the one thing, and people think I'm joking when I say this, but I mean, you can go back and read some very serious college football writers who've examined this topic in detail. Clemson is known for being great at sign stealing. And, listen, as long as you're not using like technology or something like that, then maybe all is fair. And, loving college football, it may not be cheating to use the sign stealing. It may just be a thing that Clemson is good at doing with their own naked eye or whatever else. But I'd like to think that maybe Kendrick makes it a little harder to steal signs. Maybe he knows a little something about that. I mean, there are plenty of people before that Ohio State game that were saying that the Buckeyes were treating that as a real factor in the game, that you had to be aware of the fact that Clemson was just pretty good at figuring out what it was you were going to do before you did it. I'd like to think that Kendrick makes that maybe a little easier, if that's even really a thing.
I don't know about that, but I will say you bring up that Ohio State game. The Buckeyes in that game did a great job of using tempo to try and offset Clemson stealing signs there. And so because of that, I think that's something that Georgia's going to try and sprinkle in. Obviously, I think this game is going to be a low-scoring affair. I love the under this week. But it's going to be interesting to see how Georgia mixes in tempo throughout this game as a way to try and maybe catch that Clemson defense off guard while they are trying to sort of diagnose what Georgia might be doing.
So you're going to have to sell me on the under on this for a moment. We'll obviously make our picks as a part of Go With The Flow for later on the week here on the DawgNation video channels. But I went back and looked at this, and I talked about this as a part of our 1st and 15 on one of the days this week. The last 7 times Clemson's lost, they've only lost 7 times since 2015. They've been in the college football playoff every year since then. Only 7 losses over that span. And on average, the team that has beaten Clemson has scored 40 points. That it's taken a lot of points to beat Clemson. You look at their record against the SEC, which is very good. They've only been a couple of SEC teams to beat them over that span. On average, SEC teams in those games only scoring 21 points. So you see a lot of SEC teams not getting it done against Clemson. A lack of scoring seems to be a commonality. You look at the teams that do beat Clemson, obviously an SEC team like LSU and Ohio State a year ago, Alabama going back a number of years in the college football playoff, even the Pitt team that beat them in kind of a surprising fashion a few years before that. The teams that beat Clemson seem to find a way to score points. I'm not saying that Georgia has to score 40 on Saturday because I don't think it can, but I think it probably needs to score 30, and I think that does bring the over-under into play. But regardless of the betting angle on this, you think that Georgia can win this game on Saturday with scoring fewer than 30 points? Because I don't.
I do, and I think they're going to have to. I think Clemson's defensive line is the best part of their team. Georgia's defensive line is the best part of theirs. I think the biggest question mark for this game is Clemson's offensive line. I think the second biggest is Georgia's defensive line. I think with the way that bleeds into this matchup, I have major questions about just how frequently these teams are going to be scoring. I don't think Clemson's going to be able to run the football at all. If we're here talking questions, concerns about Georgia's run defense on Monday or Tuesday, I'd be stunned. And so because of that, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. And unless Georgia really does start ripping off those big runs, because I do think Georgia is better set up as a run-blocking team than a pass-blocking team. I just think both these teams are really going to struggle to score points, and it's going to be, I think, 23-17, a low-scoring, a lot of field goals affair.
I want to ask you more about the Clemson skill guys in just a moment. Let me remind folks, this is our Kroger Fresh Take with Connor Riley here on DawgNation Daily here today. And obviously, we're thinking heavy football for the weekend, but it's also a holiday weekend. A lot of you getting settled in for what some people kind of the final farewell to summer when it comes to Labor Day holiday. Obviously, it's a great chance to enjoy for many of you a day off on Monday. Of course, we'll be here for you on DawgNation Daily as per usual, but nonetheless, a fun holiday weekend for many folks. And as you're thinking about getting stocked up for that, the same way you've gotten stocked up for all your grilling items and outdoor furniture and all the stuff at Kroger all summer long, that continues here for the Labor Day holiday weekend there as well. So if you'll check out Kroger.com/summer, you can find out a lot more about that and get stocked up for everything you need for a fun weekend. Hopefully you're celebrating a Georgia victory on Sunday and Monday, but either way, get stocked up for it at Kroger, Kroger.com/summer for more on that. Connor, for the folks who are only interested in the Georgia side of this and maybe not really following the Clemson news as much, it is really interesting how, I'll use the same word I've used to describe the Clemson offensive line, somewhat unsettled the competition at running back is for Clemson. The wide receiver stuff is kind of seemingly all over the place a little bit. I mean, this is a Clemson team, and so therefore you assume the backs and receivers they trot out on Saturday are Clemson caliber running backs and receivers. I'm not expecting either of those groups to be deficient, to be frank. But, I mean, I think if you ask Clemson fans who gets the first carry for their team on Saturday, you might get several different answers. And, the receiver position, even beyond Justin Ross, assuming he's fully healthy on Saturday, is a little bit of an unknown there too. As I said before, I'm not going to use that as fodder to make me believe that it's easy for Georgia on Saturday. But, man, there are not a ton of givens with that Clemson skill position group right now. A lot of talented potential, but not a lot of guys that Clemson fans know for sure what they're going to get right now.
Right. I mean, Clemson has to replace their top three receivers from last season. And, as far as the running backs go, I think this whole thing is a smoke show. I think they're going to give the ball to Will Shipley quite often on Saturday. I think he's going to be their leading ball carrier. I think it could be something similar to like what we saw with Tanks Bigsby for the Auburn game last year, where, they had more veteran ball carriers there, but Shipley, much like I think Bigsby, just brings a different element that in a game against a talented defense like Georgia has, you just need out there. And as far as wide receivers, we all have heard a lot of great things about Joe Nada, Frank Laston, E.J. Williams as well, but a lot of those guys are unproven and have not played a defense as good as this Georgia one has. Obviously, there are some concerns on the outside, who's going to be that other starting cornerback opposite Derion Kendrick, and Kendrick has had his own struggles against elite passing offenses. But, I think DJ Uiagalelei is going to have to throw a lot of these guys open and make really impressive plays. And so because of that, I think you're going to put a lot on the shoulders of a quarterback who this is his third career start, and by far, I think the toughest defense that he has had to face in his college career to this point.
I've been asked a lot about who Georgia's receivers are going to be on Saturday, and if you kind of think about, I don't really use the word starter a ton. I think more like, who gets targeted the most, who's on the field the most, and I guess the assumption that I'm making is, despite the fact that he's maybe still a little bit banged up, Kearis Jackson will be one of those. I expect Jermaine Burton to be one of those, and I guess my third name there would be Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, with maybe like A.D. Mitchell just on the outside of that group right now. What do you make of the top trio for Georgia on Saturday? Who do you expect it to be?
Yeah, I expect those same three guys. I would actually say I think James Cook finishes in the top three of the Georgia receptions or receiving yards that day. I think you've got to get him heavily involved in the passing game there. I think he's going to open up a lot of things, especially against Clemson's running backs or linebackers there. But I think you also need a big game from Jermaine Burton specifically here. I'll be interested to see how Kearis Jackson is coming off that knee. But I'm not expecting a huge game from him. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, while I think he's got a high ceiling, second game or his first game off of a serious ankle injury and hasn't really proven himself yet even before that ankle injury. I think you need a guy like Burton to really step up and show, hey, well, we don't have George Pickens. I'm an incredibly talented wide receiver making big plays in big games, sort of like he did last year against Alabama, where didn't have a great game, but found the end zone, 4 catches for 54 yards. He's going to have to up that if Georgia's going to beat Clemson on Saturday, but he's not going to be afraid of the moment. And so because of that, I think Burton's the guy that you need to have a big game.
I think I know what the Georgia offensive line is going to be on Saturday, and I know it's kind of hard to just rattle off 5 names. That ends up being a little bit of information overload. But, I mean, McClendon's obviously given there on the right side. So a tackle, the other 4, give me what you think that's going to be.
I think Jamari Sire is going to be your left tackle. I think Justin Schaefer is going to be your left guard, and that's a lock. I think Tate Ratledge is going to be your right guard, and that is a lock. And I think they're going to start Cedric Von Pron, and they're going to use Warren Erickson as sort of that 6th offensive lineman who can rotate and move around and do some things depending on how the rest of the offensive line plays. But I wouldn't be shocked if Erickson is starting. I did notice yesterday that Erickson does have a much smaller cast on his snapping hand now. But I still think they maybe go with Von Pron, see what he gives them, and if, he struggles in that game, which he certainly could. Clemson has, again, as we talked about, a very good defensive line. I think maybe then you possibly see Warren Erickson slide in there at center. But they've got really, I think, 6 guys for 5 spots.
This is like rampant speculation now, but what are the chances you think that maybe Erickson plays a guard position as opposed to just center on Saturday?
I could certainly see that. He has experience there. And, again, it's Tate Ratledge's first career start. I'm not saying he's going to be overwhelmed by the moment or anything like that, but I think Warren Erickson is a much more known quantity at one of those guard spots, and I think that would maybe make things easier for Cedric Von Pron in terms of making calls and seeing where the defense is because he has experience doing that.
I thought it was really interesting here, Kirby, yesterday talking about his running backs, and I think he said something, I believe this was yesterday, I think he said something to the effect of, I probably feel the way about my running backs that Clemson does, but its defensive line. It just seems like these guys have been here for a while, and obviously you could tell just the body language and the language that Smart has used, but these guys going back the last couple of months, that there's a high confidence level there. When I start thinking about, Georgia winning this game, and I've been pushing this now for a while, but one way or another, the presence of these Georgia backs, the depth that exists there, and I know people get kind of fascinated with who gets how many carries and how do you divide all that up, and frankly, I'm not that interested in that part of this just for right now. I'm looking at a position group that features a bunch of guys that I truly believe are capable of playing, and the sheer volume of that talent, you got to try to find a way to make that matter on Saturday. You mentioned throwing the ball to James Cook. I'd love to see him thrown to. I'd love to see other running backs thrown to there as well. Creative ways to get the running game going here so that it's additive to the rest of the offense and allows chains to be moved so that there can be big explosive passing plays there too. But when you think about just the overall depth, there aren't going to be very many position groups where Georgia's got more of it than it has at running back, and you got to find a way to make that really matter on Saturday. Almost any key to victory for me includes just a lot of running backs. Not conservative game plan. That's not what I want. But I want talented players to matter, and Georgia's got a bunch of them at the back spot.
Georgia needs 2 running backs to play really well. I think one of those has to be James Cook, and we'll see who that second one is. It could be Zamir White, who I think is going to get your first carry in that game and certainly has the experience and, has looked better as he's gotten farther away from that ACL injury. Obviously, Kendall Milton has as high a ceiling as anyone in that running back room, and Kenny McIntosh is also someone who can be an impact in the passing game there, and I absolutely expect to get a lot of snaps and see the field quite often on Saturday. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Georgia's got to find a way to be creative with its running backs because they are so deep, but, it'd be easy to just try and do the 3 yards in a cloud of dust offense, but I don't think that sets up well for Georgia if they're going to try and win this game. But we need to be talking about on Monday the depth in this Georgia running back room and how it absolutely swung this game for the Bulldogs, because if it doesn't happen, I just don't see them winning.
One final thing before we let you go, and I'm sure you've been following this there as well. This is quietly turning into a pretty big deal for recruiting there, too. And, these neutral site games can kind of be weird on that. Sometimes we see, recruiting stuff completely prohibited. My understanding is for Saturday that's not the case. And there's a, online chatter, long list of big recruits that are going to be there. Walter Nolan, I think, I understand he's expecting to be there. That's the example of the kinds of players who are expected to be there. We got a pretty good little list working on that. So for those of us who believe these kinds of games are measuring sticks for future recruiting success, and certainly for the 2022 class, lots of eyes on Georgia, that would seem to be both literally and figuratively speaking for a game like this, because it sounds like one of the reasons why this is such a hot ticket is because half the people in the stands are going to be elite recruits, at least on the basis of some of the chatter that I've read.
Yeah, I mean, from a recruiting standpoint, again, and I think this goes into why this game means so much for Georgia more so than Clemson is, you beat Clemson. Georgia recruits head-to-head against Clemson for elite prospects, I think at this point in time, more so than it does Alabama. So the guys you're going against them for, Oscar Delp comes to mind, Walter Nolan, A.J. Harris in the 2023 class, Labius Overton in the 2023 class. a lot of the guys that Georgia is in on, those top prospects, they're also considering Clemson more often than not. And there are a number of guys on both rosters that it came down to a Georgia or a Clemson decision. And so to have a feather in your cap like this and say, hey, I know Clemson is your number 2 school, but we went head-to-head on a neutral field, a game you happened to attend and beat them. Well, I think individual game results carry very little weight overall in recruitments. I do think this is a very big measuring stick for Georgia to show how they match up to the Clemson program and say, hey, I know Clemson does things differently. They do things their own way, but we do in a way as well, and we were able to go out there on a field and beat them.
Connor, terrific stuff. It's good to have you out there on the beat here for us right now. I know you got a lot of good written pieces. You mentioned a really good story coming up on Jordan Davis, which I'm looking forward to read. That is going to be a ton of fun, and obviously a lot as we get ready for the Dogs against Clemson on Saturday. Can't wait for it. And we'll, of course, look forward to speaking to you as part of Kroger Fresh Take again on DawgNation Daily again very soon, too.
Yep, as always, it was a pleasure, BA.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
It's getting fun, y'all. Can't wait for Georgia Clemson on Saturday. Really good stuff from Connor Riley on all of that. And, of course, a lot of you getting stocked up for that tailgate right now, too. And as you think about doing that, think about the Finnish long drink. And there's 4 different varieties. I heard from a guy yesterday. He's got, I guess, all. I'm going to show him as a part of a golden shoe later on this week. But I guess he had all 4 varieties shipped to his house because he wanted to be able to try all of them, which is kind of a fun thing to be able to consider. But you get the long drink strong. A lot of you like that for the obvious reasons. 8.5% alcohol by volume. The long drink cranberry. Long drink zero, which is a lot of fun there too. A long drink traditional there as well. So just really, really fun. I like the traditional because I like the grapefruit and the gin flavor together. It's a ready-to-drink cocktail right out of the can. It started in Finland back in the 1950s when the Summer Games were in Helsinki. It's been in the United States of America for the last couple of years, and it is wherever you are now there as well. So if you go to thelongdrink.com, you can find out more about that. Thelongdrink.com to find out more about that. All right, transition here to our SEC Through, and this is kind of a crazy story coming out of South Carolina. I guess in a roundabout way, it's kind of a good story. But although if you're a Gamecock fan, I'm not quite sure what you think about that. So Zeb Nolan was a former quarterback at North Dakota State. Now, North Dakota State's a terrific program, and obviously they've had great quarterback history there. And so Nolan was actually coming to South Carolina to work as a graduate assistant. This was essentially going to be a staffer on the program, working as a GA. And obviously, you know that Luke Doty, the South Carolina expected starting quarterback, sustained an injury. And so they were scrambling and had to have a kind of a last-minute quarterback competition. Well, lo and behold, Nolan, who had been a former quarterback and was going to be a GA, had eligibility left. They just put him on the active roster, and he won the quarterback job. He's going to start at quarterback for South Carolina on Saturday against Eastern Illinois, which is pretty bizarre all the way around. And listen, there is a lot that I have liked about the start of the Shane Beamer era at South Carolina. He was one of the guys I mentioned before. I watched some of that Marty McGee thing on the SEC network, and I just think Beamer handles himself pretty well. I think his sell job as the Gamecocks coach is not so much, hey, I'm Frank Beamer's son, because that wears thin pretty quick. When I see Beamer selling, and I think this really works. He was born in Charleston, obviously worked at South Carolina, has a lot of what seems to be, it comes across as true, authentic love for the state of South Carolina, the Gamecocks program. And so I actually think that Shane Beamer, maybe more so than the other first-year coaches in the SEC, has a chance to do something with his opportunity at South Carolina, but obviously not having Doty for the very beginning of the season and however long that injury lasts, that becomes a little bit of a problem. I mean, I think of, from a gambling standpoint, you may care about this. Like, to me, one of the best unders in the SEC right now is Tennessee, numbered about 6.5, really more like 6. I just think that Tennessee's heading for a losing record, and if you're thinking about the Vols getting to a 6-6 or thinking about something along those lines, a game against South Carolina is a real swing game. Or if you're just thinking about first-year coaches who establishes momentum going into year 2, beyond just the gambling part of this, Beamer versus Heupel is a big swing game there in that regard. So I think it can be a nice first season for Beamer, but he's going to have to weather the storm here of having a quarterback to begin the year, which is not the one that he planned on having. I think this is interesting coming out of Texas A&M, and the reason why I think this is interesting is because like the one thing that you see from a lot of people, our audience included, like Jimbo Fisher's got no real tie to Georgia. He's played against the Dogs in 2019, was offensive coordinator back at LSU, back when Georgia and LSU had some memorable games. But for the most part, like there's not a lot of cross-pollination between Georgia and Jimbo Fisher. Yet there are a lot of Georgia fans that I hear from when I bring up Fisher, they don't seem to like him very much. And the general sense is that he's like overrated as a coach, even though he's won a national championship. There's just this general sense that he's overrated as a coach. And the best I can tell, some of that is fueled by the fact that Fisher makes just a ton of money at Texas A&M. I mean, like when you think about Texas A&M, or really a lot of those states and Texas programs in Texas, but A&M in particular right now, just throwing money just left and right, just absolutely backing up the Brinks truck all the time here. And I get, Jimbo was making like $7.5 million, and in most people's mind, he wasn't really earning that paycheck. Kind of taking a step towards maybe approaching that last season, but prior to that, a lot of folks were kind of wondering, well, when's it going to start for Jimbo at Texas A&M, given the money that he's making? And I think this story is hilarious because while we're just now to the point where anybody can even reasonably say, well, he's actually worth the $7.5 million they have been paying him, lo and behold, now, according to folks that are out there, they're about to give him a big extension that's going to pay him now more than $9 million a year. And it's an extension that's going to, go through 2030. Now, listen, A&M's doing good things in the recruiting trail, and, I do believe this is a team that's a real threat eventually to Alabama in the SEC West, although I don't have them winning the division this year. But it's kind of funny. People thought he was already making a lot of money and, frankly, already making more money than his on-field results justified. But on the heels of actually having a good season, now they put him into this like crazy stratosphere of like more than $9 million a year all the way through 2030. So A&M clearly has the money to spend. They clearly are believers in Jimbo Fisher. I say this all the time. Recruits themselves seem to be the first to know. And right now there's a little bit of momentum around the program at A&M, and we'll see how much of that translates on the field here this year. I was going to do more on these week one games. Let me just say for now briefly that as we move through Thursday and Friday, we'll talk a lot about Alabama and Miami. Fascinating to me that Alabama finds themselves in the same spot year after year after year where they have dominated week one non-conference opponents in neutral sites. Is it that easy again for Bama this year? We'll ask that question over the course of the next couple of days. I think Ole Miss Louisville is a ton of fun. I think LSU, after what has obviously been a rough week, their state of Louisiana, going to UCLA, a team that won last week in a week 0 contest against Hawaii. That's worth your attention. LSU's only a 4-point favorite on the road there at UCLA. So in addition to Georgia Clemson, which obviously has all of our attention, some of these other SEC games are worth the notice there too. Bama, LSU, Ole Miss in particular. We talked earlier in the week, and if you missed one of the shows from Monday, we kind of got into those cupcake-type games that I think are probably worth paying attention to. Maybe FAU keeping it a little closer with Florida, Kentucky handling Louisiana Monroe easily in what could be a little bit of a coming-out party for a brand-new Wildcats offense. We talked about some of that on Monday. But as we move through Thursday and Friday, it's a lot more on the real big games of the SEC. In addition to Georgia Clemson, Bama doing its thing against Miami, LSU on the road in L.A., and a Monday night tilt between Ole Miss and Louisville. We'll do a lot of that then. Plus, also get a couple top 25 matchups in the Big Ten there as well. Texas plays a pretty good Louisiana team, too. So that'll be kind of the dominant portion of that conversation as we move through the rest of the week. For now, we'll make that your SEC through. And Gatorade roll call, obviously we'll kind of put that on pause here at least for a moment because the game that's on everybody's mind right now is Georgia Clemson, and that is the subject of our Golden Shoe winner for today. There's been some chatter, and we probably contributed this a little bit because we made, a little bit of the social media post that initially suggested that Clemson may wear all purple and Georgia may wear all red. We said we thought that was probably fake news, but it was still kind of fun to consider because actually the purple and red on the field together didn't look too bad. It was actually kind of a cool combination. Clemson's pretty conservative about when it wears its alternate uniforms, but nonetheless, the Dog Pound tweets out at me saying, people are talking trash about UGA possibly wearing all red uniforms. Meanwhile, Clemson's being sponsored by Nickelodeon. If you're watching on video, you see the purple and orange Nickelodeon logo next to the purple and orange Clemson. That's actually really pretty funny from the Dog Pound there. We'll make the Dog Pound our Golden Shoe winner for today, and we'll remind you, Gatorhater Countdown will be here eventually 59 days from now. Dogs also beat Florida, but you got to beat Clemson first. We'll see you tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, of course, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price is promised. Your air conditioning unit that, let's be honest, if that thing's 20-plus years old, you know it's on its last legs. If it's 10-plus years old, you got to be at least thinking about that. So if you're worried about that, and you probably should be, hot weekend on the way, get that system tuned back up. Factory fresh specs. That's what RS Andrews can do for you. And the great news is it only costs $99. Excited about being with Dari Payro for Go With The Flow as our Picks of the Week show returns here for another year and a part of DawgNation Invasion to Charlotte on Saturday. That is all really fun. All right, let's do – I did YouTube first yesterday. Let's do Facebook first today. We'll do DawgNation.com commenters, DawgNation app commenters, YouTube commenters. We will do the whole thing here, and let's get it going. Over here on the Facebook side for now, Nick Roundtree excited about 59 days from Georgia, Florida. Me too. Christopher Jacobs wants to take Clemson to the woodshed. Jan Armistead says, why am I wearing my SEC shirt? I'm glad you asked that, Jan. I should have mentioned this, but I'm glad that you asked. Every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we do SEC Country Live on the SEC Country video channels, Facebook, and SEC Country Live on YouTube. And so this shirt always stands as an advertisement that show is coming up today at 3 p.m. Our buddy, Mr. College Football, Tony Barnhart, going to be on there with us today. A lot of close look at everything going down with Georgia, Clemson, all the other big games there too. So a lot of that today on SEC Country Live. So we'll see you there for all of that. Chris James says, how's the receiver room looking? I talked to Connor Riley about this a moment ago. Our picks for the top 3 receivers for Saturday were the same. We both said it's Kearis Jackson. Kearis may not be a fully 100%, but close enough to matter. Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, who obviously coming back from a very serious injury himself, but I believe the reports on that have been certainly very positive, and I think he's ready to be a big contributor. And what I believe Georgia's leading receiver will be on Saturday, Jermaine Burton, also in that group too. I think you'll see a good bit of A.D. Mitchell on the field, and Connor mentioned also throwing the ball to James Cook, so that's kind of the story there on that. Brian Williamson says there's only one huge game this weekend, obviously referencing the Georgia-Clemson. Barry Watkins says the weather for Saturday is supposed to be sunny and 86 degrees. That's great news. It's really time to start paying close attention to that, make sure it stays that way, but so far so good it sounds like. Wayne Kirkland says we must score north of 34 to beat Clemson. Yeah, Wayne, you're closer to me than it sounds like Connor was. I just don't think you can beat Clemson 21-17. I think that's what other SEC teams, Texas A&M, Auburn, for instance, have tried to do, and they failed there along that way. Jacob O'Neill says, Randy Hall says once Cedric Von Prawn gets the center position, he may not give it up. Yeah, I'm with you, Randy, that SVP is a really good player. I also think Warren Erickson's a really good player too, but I understand where you're coming from. Chase and Jesse Barbie say, do we sell shirts that rep the show? So for now, we're actually not really selling our DawgNation gear for reasons that have, probably too boring too complicated to bore you with. We do give away a lot of shirts, and so that's the one thing that we do enjoy doing. A lot of times what we'll say is, hey, let's have a sponsor pay for the shirts, and that way we can give them to people for free. And so, like, for instance, for our DawgNation Invasion coming up this weekend, we're giving away shirts. We did a big DawgNation Days of Summer outing earlier at the Truist Park for the Braves a little earlier this year. We had a fun T-shirt that we gave away for that. So that's kind of the way we approach this stuff. We typically, at least in recent years, the kind of the corporate philosophy has been, let's get a sponsor to pay for the shirt, and then that way we can give it to fans for free, and that's kind of where we are on that. Frank Palumbo says over-under on sacks for Saturday for both teams. I think it can be as simple, Frank, as saying the team with the most sacks wins the game. And so for Georgia, I think you're hoping it's more than 4, or should say more than 3. And I think if you're also hoping for Clemson, it's less than 3. Like, for some reason, 3 has just felt like a magic number for me. That, the idea that Georgia's going to win if it gives up 5 sacks, and just think it gets harder to do. You're talking about drives that end with no points at that point in time. And, if you're not affecting Uiagalelei with your own pressure, your own sacks, then all of a sudden that gives Clemson too many opportunities to have drives that end in points themselves. So I've looked at 3 as that kind of magic number. You want more than that for Georgia, you want less than that for Clemson. Matt Rukavina, good stuff from Matt. Philip Jordan Wells says DawgNation's not for the profit, it's for the people. We like to be for both, to be completely honest with you. I like to be for the people, but it is those profits that I take home and use to trade for food at Kroger to put on my kids' table. So around here, we need both the people and the profits, if you get my drift on that. Chris Slim White says Justin Robinson left out again by y'all. Not leaving Justin Robinson out, but, I mean, to be completely honest with you, I don't think he's one of Georgia's top 3 receivers on Saturday. If I'm wrong, then I'll be glad to be that way. But when you talk about really getting down to the top 3, I don't believe that Robinson's in that top 3 right now, but maybe I end up being wrong about that. Daniel Aldrich says he has a big DawgNation sticker on the back of his shirt. That's cool stuff. That's awesome to hear. Thomas Chandler likes the idea of the 2-back set, playing with Cook in the slot. I like that a lot too. I really do. Miriam Martin Corbin says, when and where is the dog walk on Saturday? So that's always kind of the adventure when you're away from home, especially a stadium where we're not used to seeing Georgia play at. Start thinking about 2.5 hours prior to the game. It's going to be one of the gates, and we'll just have to sort of wander around until we find it. That's always a little bit of an adventure. Always a little bit of an adventure there. Jermaine King on the DawgNation homepage says, don't wear the SEC country shirt in Charlotte. The SEC isn't on good terms with the ACC commissioner right now. That's exactly right, yeah. I'll be all DawgNation decked out for Charlotte for sure. Kevin J. and Emma Franklin talking about the score that's going to win the game. Kenneth Hicks says, I think if the total point is under 55, UGA will have an excellent chance of winning. Maybe so, but I guess my feeling on this is if you're hanging your hat on a Georgia fan as Georgia's going to play good defense and eke out a close win in a low-scoring game, I think that you're putting a lot of pressure on a Georgia defense to hold Clemson for 60 minutes. To me, the definition of good defense now is not you go out there and you shut down an offense, you only yield 17 points. That's just asking too much. To me, even with new faces in key places for Clemson on the offense, to me, it still kind of comes down to, hey, it's not about shutting them down for an entire game. It's about getting a couple of key stops. It's about turning a touchdown into a field goal or forcing a turnover that gets the defense off the field. It's about getting some stops when you need them, slowing it down so that your offense can be the one that makes the play. I just think that if you're hanging your hat on, allowing 21 points and finding a way to win that way, you're just really asking for a very thin margin for error. Kevin J. says much better run game belongs to Georgia. I probably agree with that. At least that needs to be the case for sure. Emma Franklin, once again, talking about some of those score predictions. That's fun to be able to see. DogFan623 says, don't sleep on James Cook having 4 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown, leading UGA this game, taking a wheel route 55 or 60 yards. Yeah, the one thing that DogFan that he's been really very good at doing is, like the big plays that you describe, it kind of gets lost because Georgia eventually lost the game, but like an 85-yard touchdown against Alabama, there is certainly a big play quotient when you think about James Cook. Yeah, so really fun, good comments all the way around there. We'll come back to the DawgNation homepage there in a moment. Let me also pop over here to YouTube and find out how the YouTube folks are doing on a day like this. And R.S. Andrews cool down ahead of the big game coming up on Saturday. And a lot of DawgNation coverage in the next few days on that too, including our show here, which is, we said last week, things just get longer and longer by the day. And now we've added the first and 15th at the beginning. We're essentially on for what feels like 3 hours now. Baggins and Friends says, I bet Fitz starts at tight end. Yeah, I think not only will he start, I think he's a big factor in the game on Saturday. John Adams says, hey, maybe you could try Justin Robinson at tight end. He's certainly a strong dude. I think he's still got a bright future at wide receiver, but I understand where you're coming from because he's a physical guy for sure. Jordan Bain says, I don't see how this game is under 51.5. Both teams have given up a lot of points in their recent losses. That's a good point. Even Notre Dame dropped 47 when they beat Clemson in the regular season. I think the game will be in the 38, 28, 35, 31 range, regardless of who wins. I actually agree with Jordan on that almost completely. I think that feeling is very similar to my own. Gregory A. Smith dropping a little bit of a troll comment in there. Gregory, good to have you with us for that. Frank Patterson says we'll be doing pre- and halftime post-game show. Yeah, all that remains unchanged. Still Kroger kickoff live from Charlotte before the game. I'm looking forward to that. We'll show you the dog walk in some form or fashion. I'll have you for the post-game show as well. And Terrence Edwards is going to once again be back part of that. I love Terrence post-game. He really gives you an unfiltered view from a player perspective how the game unfolded. That'll be good. And last couple of years, Mike has handled the halftime duties, and I'm guessing he's going to do that again. Paul Moon says Blaylock is close but not cleared, and yeah, that's the sense that you got there a little earlier. Richard Hill says, wish they had Pickens. Yeah, I do too. I mean, like, here's the thing that worries me a little bit, is that if the Pickens injury lingers, and there's a very good chance that it does, I mean, think about how little football we actually saw from George Pickens in a Georgia uniform. And I don't want to, like, be negative about that or anything like that, because this is a fun week to get ready for a big game. But in the back of my mind, if Pickens chooses not to return, or if he's just not healthy enough to return, then you're talking about a window for Pickens at Georgia that actually is very, very small. When we saw him, he's been dazzling, and you're left to wonder if you're going to see him again. And listen, he knows, and I know his family knows, that they got to make the decision that's right for them when it comes to all that kind of stuff. And I would never tell them anything else other than that. I'll also readily acknowledge selfishly, I hope we still get a chance to see him in a Georgia uniform again. It remains to be seen that's the case, but if it doesn't work out that way, man, you talk about, a fleeting moment of seeing a pretty spectacular player who seemed to have a real flair for big moments, as entertaining a player as I think George has had. I mean, sheer entertainment value, Pickens provides as much of that as anybody. And it's just kind of a shame to think that, this injury for him came at just the worst time. Johnny Lester says, my key to the game is third down conversions. Clemson, big, strong wide receivers against our patchwork secondary and our beat-up wide receivers against Clemson secondary. That's a good point. It's a very good point. Jerry Dogfan says, if the defense can score, we can get 40+. Their offense is young. Boy, you're talking about changing the tone of that game in a huge way. Imagine how big a defensive score would be. Michael Porter says, looking for a great night from Jordan Davis. I understand that for sure. Derion Davis says, you got to pressure DJ Uiagalelei. I would agree with you on that. Andrew Hughes says, who are the refs? I'm not sure what league they're coming from, to be honest with you. That's a great question. Foster Moss says, is the game 100% capacity? It is 100% capacity. Yes, it is. Whether it's ACC refs or refs from a different spot, I'm not 100% sure on that. Paul Moon asking about Robert Beal. Like, at one point in time, it seems like we were hearing more about Beal. But as you really get ready for the game, I think you're thinking about, the more usual suspects, the Adam Anderson, Nolan Smith at outside linebacker, and if I had to guess, third outside linebacker into the game is probably MJ Sherman, if I had to guess. A Green Soldier says, am I the only one thinking about how little actual playing time Clemson's offense has that makes a difference? Yeah, it's very inexperienced. Now, we also see, great players, young players play, very well at the kind of college football playoff level as freshmen. Trevor Lawrence in 2018, as a for instance. So Alabama played a ton of freshmen in the national championship game against Georgia in 2017. So young players at the level we're talking about here are not incapable, but you are correct, Green Soldier, that that it is really a pretty inexperienced Clemson group. Beyond Justin Ross, the receiver position, they got a lot of talented wide receivers, but go back and look from a returning production standpoint, these were not guys who put up big numbers a year ago. It's 100% true. Yita Cookie says the refs coming from Bishop Sycamore. Yeah, listen, it's going to be a long time before I get tired of that Bishop Sycamore. I kind of want a Bishop Sycamore jersey, or at the very least, like a Bishop Sycamore t-shirt. I kind of want one of those. Derek Green asked a very important question. How do you think our new secondary is going to hold up? I guess here's what I'm hoping for from the secondary. I'm just hoping not to think much about it, right? I mean, is it going to be like a, remember DeAndre Baker beginning of the South Carolina game, interception for touchdown, big factor from the word go. Maybe not quite to that level, but is it one of those things where midway through the third quarter we kind of catch ourselves thinking, oh, yeah, I haven't really thought much yet about this inexperienced secondary. I'm hoping it's more one of those things of it just kind of blends into the action, and I think there's a chance that happens. Matt Presley also asked about the Clemson run game, which is very similar to the receiver position in that I guess the thing I'm holding my breath for is, well, what if Will Shipley just really is this dynamic weapon, catching the wheel routes, outside runs, what if this is one of those guys that you're leaning on him so much, the lack of experience becomes a non-factor because Shipley's just that dynamic. There's at least some chance that's true, and I guess I'm going to withhold my opinion on what is clearly an unproven group of running backs. And as I said before, there is some dispute from Clemson fans about who even gets the first carry for Clemson there in that spot. I'm going to withhold saying too much about that until I see exactly what a guy like Will Shipley brings to the table. Steve Shaffini asking about the game sponsor. So my dearly departed father, Steve, would be very, very upset with you for saying that. My dad was the biggest Duke's mayonnaise fan in the world. I'm not, I'll give them a free plug because they are sponsoring the game. They're not paying me a dime, so I'm not, going to say too much about them. But my dad was a huge Duke's mayonnaise fan. We're like very, very, much a believer that version of mayonnaise. I think it's kind of a Southern thing, I guess. Was better than all the other, kinds of mayonnaise that were out there. I wouldn't touch mayonnaise with a 10-foot pole no matter where it came from, but my dad loved the Duke's mayonnaise for sure. Keith Folds, yes, game day is in Charlotte on Saturday morning. It is indeed. Chad Buchanan calling for a big day from the Georgia offensive line. That's very important. Somebody, the comment went by too fast. I didn't see the name, but somebody's like, "Hey, you got to watch out for Hunter Renfrow playing his 9th season for Clemson, for sure." John Benton says, "Is Shipley the new McCaffrey?" You're going to be hearing that a ton, whether that's for the obvious reasons or if it's more of an apt comparison. We'll find that out ourselves, but you're going to be hearing that a ton. Steve Highland giving us a throwback to the Clemson. He says strip sack for a touchdown. Now, you got to understand this, Steve. Now, you got to understand this. I didn't know you know this. We're getting ready to go after this. There are a lot of Georgia fans in that stadium on Saturday that did not get to go to a game last year. There are a lot of Georgia fans who have been longing to be in a stadium with other Georgia fans. Now, listen, there's going to be a bunch of orange in there too, Clem and Clemson. They're both going to be there on Saturday. You understand that. But can you imagine if what Steve describes, that actually plays itself out that way? A strip sack and a touchdown for a full stadium to rock and roll near the beginning of the game. I mean, that is, woo boy, that is a lot to think about right there. That is a lot to think about that. Steve Shaffini says he'd still use mustard. Yeah, listen, I'm not a huge in condiment all the way around, Steve. I don't really like the mayonnaise. I don't really like the I'm not looking to go down any of that route. I've always been weird about stuff like that, for sure. Chris Branham was a Hunter Renfrow joke. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I enjoyed that. All right, let me do one or two more. We got to go, y'all. Paige Holloway says, run the ball, control the clock, and keep them off the field. I like that. Ben Green says, by the way, good to see one of our legends, Ben Green, over here on the DawgNation.com homepage saying, I really want to see our defense score. Yeah, I mean, there are a few things in football because I've missed the crowd. I was very thankful a year ago to be able to go to the games. But, y'all, there were some of those games. It was just flat out weird. Like the artificial crowd noise was worse than having no noise at all. Now, on TV, it may not have felt that way. But in the stadium, that phony noise, almost sounding like you kind of turned up the noise machine in your child's bedroom, it was worse than nothing. It was awful. So I'm completely amped up about crowd being there. And there are just a few things in football that get a crowd more amped up than anything else. I'll give you my short list here. I love when the crowd's making noise on third down, and then the pass rusher on the snap gets away from the blocker, and as he gets closer and closer to the quarterback, the crowd noise just builds to a crescendo. I love that feeling in football. I don't know if there's anything that causes the crowd to make more noise than a defensive score. I think you can throw an 80-yard bomb offensively, but a defensive score makes the crowd make even more noise, so I love that. I hope Ben Green gets his wish, in other words. I hope we see a defensive score. Back over here on YouTube for a moment. Bill Shirley says, I hope UGA is in white. They are in white. They are wearing the white and the silver breeches. Let's see what else. Green Soldier says the sun will be down. Yeah, it's still going to be hot, though. Now, you're right. The dark uniforms, I guess, don't really matter as much when it's nighttime, but it's going to be hot. All right, let's get ready to go. Marcinio, hoping it doesn't take the punt Ruski to beat Clemson. Obviously, hearkening back to the great fake punt call for Bobby Bowden against Clemson in 1987, which was a fun moment for me. RT367, boy, we hadn't seen RT in a while. Saying, checking in to say go Dogs. RT, good to have you here. Thomas Van Santa wanting that woof, woof, woof. That's fun to think about. Spencer Clark says Georgia's got great specialists. That matters in a game like this. Kevin Butler in 1984 with 60-yard field goal to win it. Really, both these teams, Clemson and Georgia, have terrific punters. I'm hoping not to see Camarda punting a lot, but when he does, man, you want to see him boom it. That is fun. All right. We got to go. HR picking stuff asking if Herb Street's going to shed a tear if Clemson loses. I think his sons were walk-ons there for a while. At least a son was walk-on there for a while. But I believe that son is now transferred to Ohio State as a walk-on. I may be wrong about that, but I think that's true. Let's see what else. All right, y'all have a great day. Appreciate you being here. All kinds of fun stuff going on. So y'all check out RS Andrews online. rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, electric needs. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, RS Andrews can replace it for you the same day. But you got to find them online at rsandrews.com. Let me also give a shout out to my friends at the AJC. Check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Obviously, troubling night, when it comes to the situation with the Atlanta Braves. Ozzie Albies had to be helped off last night. A little bit concerned about that. I guess reporting most recently, AJC.com on this is X-rays were negative on that. Braves have been through too much when it comes to that kind of stuff. The truth is I was well asleep well before any of this happened, but I did read a little bit about this morning. You can check more of that online at AJC.com. So it sounds like the X-ray news on that was good. And also, this is fun. So a lot of you know I was at East Lake Golf Club the other day. Beautiful. I mean, talk about just a pristine golfing environment here in our great city. The Tour Championship, the final of the PGA Tour. It's earlier this year because we got a Ryder Cup coming up just after that. And so the finale of the PGA Tour season happens in Atlanta this weekend. Really good coverage of the Tour Championship and the terrific run to the playoffs. It's an interesting format, right? You don't start with everybody at even par, right? You kind of prorate the players based on how they've previously performed in the playoffs. So y'all check this out, ajc.com, for more details on that. All right, we got to go for now. Thanks for being here. RS Andrews Cool Down, DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 10 a.m. for the show, 9:45 a.m. for the First and 15 on DawgNation.com and the DawgNation app. SEC Country Live, 3 p.m. today. 1,000 other things between now and game time. We'll tell you all about it. See you then tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.